The White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce and SCC TV are proud to present Your Business Matters, dedicated to your business needs. The White Bear Area Chamber is a nonprofit business organization serving as advocates to the White Bear area and its business community. Now, here's the Executive Director of the White Bear Area Chamber and the host of Your Business Matters, Tom Snell.
Welcome to Your Business Matters, brought to you by the White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce. Each month, we interview community leaders and local business owners so you can be informed about the developments in our community. I'm pleased to welcome Senator John Marty, a leading Democrat proponent on single-payer health care and a 10-term DFL legislator. Senator Marty lives in Roseville, and we will discuss whether single-payer health insurance is good for business, all on Your Business Matters. Senator Marty, thank you for joining me today.
Very pleased to be with you.
Yeah, and I want to start right away with what made you so passionate about the healthcare industry?
Okay, well, number one thing is that there's so many people who don't get care when they need. Recently heard about somebody made the news, a young guy who died from a lack of insulin. He couldn't afford insulin, and the guy's working, but insulin's getting very expensive. And I think healthcare is something like education or police and fire that everybody needs. You may need more police protection than me, depending on where you live or what happens, whether you're in an auto accident and so on or not. But you need police protection, I need police protection, we all do. And I think the same thing's true of healthcare. When I see that we're basically the only industrialized country on the planet, it doesn't make it something that everybody gets access to. And yet we're spending twice what other countries spend on healthcare.
We're paying twice.
Twice as much.
Okay.
And that seemed to me something that really, we got to do something about it. And I just think that it's a moral issue and an economic issue. You know, we are spending at least a fourth more on healthcare than the next most expensive nation when we're talking per person healthcare expenditures. And the average of other countries is well under half of ours, and the vast majority are under half. And so it seems to me that it's not that we don't have great healthcare. We got some of the best doctors in the world, the best nurses and hospitals and clinics and medical technology in Minnesota especially. We got some of the best in the world, but the worst system for accessing it and putting it together, and it's kind of a happenstance. Okay,
well, let me go into that a little bit here. Just a couple of issues, and I realize that our system is somewhat inefficient and needs to be more focused on intermediate care for patients. If you look at a couple of states, and I want to bring this up because what we want to do is focus a little bit on how will this affect the business community.
Right.
And I want to look at two states first of all that have seriously looked at this issue. One is California, and the other is Vermont. And as you realize, the state of California is probably one of the bluest blue states anywhere. I mean, the governor of California would be ranked as one of the most liberal.
They're not the same kind of state as Minnesota or other states.
Right. But I mean, you'd have to, you know, Governor Brown is probably one of the most progressive governors or liberal governors in the country. And if you look at Vermont, Vermont is a very liberal state, even though they have a Republican governor. He's probably a moderate Republican governor, and obviously Senator Bernie Sanders comes from Vermont, who actually calls himself a socialist or a social democrat. So going back to California, there has the legislature in California tried to get through a bill that would be similar to a single-payer health system, and I believe the governor backed down on that because of the cost of implementing that. And I wanted to find out from you if this is such a great idea, why did the most liberal state, one of the most liberal states in the country, say we can't afford it?
And by the way, first of all, I would challenge that this is a liberal thing. I think this is should be a nonpartisan thing, and particularly good for rural communities. But
you get my point.
Oh, I hear your point exactly, and it's one that's commonly raised and so on. And the bottom line is we're shifting who's paying for and how we're paying for healthcare in many ways. Right now, like in my proposal, we call it the Minnesota Health Plan, a universal health care proposal, you'd be paying premiums, but instead of paying premiums based on your age and your health condition, in other words, the older and sicker you are, the more you're going to pay.
Yeah.
Instead of that, we'd be paying it based on ability to pay, because the theory should be everybody has to pay into it. But if you're very much struggling to pay the bills, you're not able to afford much.
Okay.
So, but the bottom line is how it's paid for. Right now, healthcare is 1/6 of our economy. It's bigger than state government. And if we're paying for it, again, about over half of our healthcare dollars now paid by state and federal government. And what we'd be saying is that the premiums people pay right now to Blue Cross or whoever they'd be paying to, like in our case, Minnesota Health Plan. And it's a big change. I mean, it's an absolutely huge change from the way we do things. I'd say it's similar to the way we do police, fire, and public schools.
Well, how come in California, though, getting back again, you've got a state, and I'll take away the liberal conservative thing, but it's a state that one would expect
to try
would be a leader
like this,
in trying something like that. Why don't you think they did it?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's a huge change. There's lots of people who are vested in the status quo because they benefit from it. And so I don't know. I have not looked at the California proposal. There's one out there that's being considered right now, but I haven't looked at it, and I don't know Governor Brown. I don't know his logic or anything else behind it. But so my point is, let's figure out what we want to do. I always use the argument when you go on a trip, the first thing you need to do is know where you're going. You don't just get in the car. Well, some people might, but if you're going on a vacation, you might want to know we're going out to Yellowstone or something and figure out where you're going and details like that. And I think when you want to figure out with a healthcare system, what do we want out of it? And we map out principles the healthcare system should do, and then you design a healthcare system around that. I don't even focus on single payer because I don't care if it's not single payer. If somebody can meet the principles I think any healthcare plan should do, cover everyone, cover all their medical needs, which I think is important, including your dental, including long-term care, including mental health and chemical dependency, covering everything. And there's several principles like this, and if somebody has a plan that does it, then I'm in favor of it. It doesn't have to be single payer.
The United States is set up a little differently. Where we look at things as kind of states being the center for innovation. Again, when you look at Vermont, which tried to have, I don't know if it was single payer or what kind of a system
they called it that, but I wouldn't.
What they want, they back down because of
and they said
they
couldn't because of federal government issues, because of cost issues and so on. And the bottom line is, the first thing to keep in mind when you're talking about a healthcare system, remember it's 1/6 of our economy.
Right.
I keep thinking about how, talking about in Minnesota, we spend $51 billion a year in healthcare. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Over half is paid by state and federal government in the end, but the rest is paid by about almost a quarter paid by business and more than a quarter paid by individuals. And so, to me, you figure out, if we're spending that $51 billion, could we spend that $51 billion, cover everyone, and still have money left over? Because right now, we don't have money left over, and we're banked. So my point is, let's figure out what we want to do and figure out a way to get there.
And let's look at Minnesota then. We'll go and we'll take a look at Minnesota now for part of the interview. Again, Minnesota, if you look, and the information I'm going to get you comes from a conservative think tank.
Okay.
So
that's fine.
But it'll be somewhat agreeable, I think. Our taxes in Minnesota are higher than normal in the United States. I think our property taxes.
One of the top 15 or so states overall.
According to the Center for the American Experiment, our personal income taxes for probably the higher rate are like third in the country.
Our income taxes are higher, property tax is not so high.
Yeah, for individual, but for business, property taxes are higher. So how do you think you can, if our taxes are higher on higher individuals with higher property taxes, and I mean through commercial, and for people that have higher income taxes, they're in the higher brackets. How do you think, if some of these people are business leaders or business owners, how are you going to sell your program to the people that employ our Minnesota citizens?
Well, I'd start by using, he's not your typical businessman, but he's well respected by most. Warren Buffett, he told his shareholders last year, he favors a single payer, a universal system. I don't like using the word single payer because most people
Okay,
don't know what
let's
it
just
is.
say, universal health care.
But he argued we ought to do that. And he said, business folks are always complaining about corporate taxes. He says, corporate tax is about 2% of our economy now, 2% of our gross national product. He said in the 1960s, early 60s, it was about 4%. And he's not saying they shouldn't complain about it and so on, but he said, healthcare in the early 60s was about 5% of our economy. Now it's 17%, and business pays a huge chunk of it, and maybe we ought to be more concerned about that. And to me, businesses, when you look at how much struggle, whether it's legal or not, there is, even if it's subconscious in an owner's head, if I'm hiring a 55-year-old guy as opposed to a 35-year-old guy, the cost of their health care is going to be higher. I have all those huge costs. I got to shop for health care every year. You got all those burdens, and saying we're going to make it a simpler system where all your employees are covered. You don't have to worry about it. They're going to be covered cradle to grave for all their health care, and it's cheaper. That's the business case I'd like to make on it.
Okay, so how are you going to sell like a person that employs 5 or 10 people? How are you going to go to that business person, maybe a member of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce,
Right.
or how are you going to go to the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and tell them that they should change their priorities?
Hey, I've been trying to get chances to address various chambers around the state. I've spoken to several in the last number of years, but it's amazing.
Including ours.
Yes, it's amazing how hard it's been to get the chance to do so. And because I think this is something that should be in business's interest, very much is in business interest. Because it saves money, because it keeps employees healthier, and because it avoids a huge hassle. I mean, the one illustration is a vice president at General Mills about 10 years ago. He said, if you tried to design a healthcare system that didn't work, you couldn't have done a better job than we've done. And to me, a small business owner struggling to keep their employees, which means they got to try and offer them healthcare benefits, and many are mandated to offer benefits. It's cheaper to do it.
I want to go on to another part of that discussion, and again, this relates back to business and how people look at healthcare. I think there's always in this country, there's always been kind of a thought that you don't really, you don't. We're kind of libertarian in our viewpoint of do we trust the government? As a big standpoint. And so we always look at things that are consumer based. And one thing that I'm wondering if both Democrats and Republicans can agree on is that we need more transparency in the healthcare industry. And I want to use an example of that. There's in the state of New Hampshire, there was a company. I'm not going to mention the names because I'm not going to sell a company, but they make it real easy for people on certain types of issues that aren't. It's not like you're getting brain surgery, but if you got to get an MRI done on your shoulder, or if you're going to have to get a shot in your knee or something, where's the lowest price place you can go? Because price and quality really don't matter that much. And if you go to somebody that has a low price and high quality, you actually get a rebate check. And this company was able to slash healthcare costs. Could you agree to something like that where consumers actually, consumers and business people actually are taking the lead in looking for ways to economize health care?
I would, except for the fact that consumers trying to decide, well, first of all, if you need something urgent, you can't do that.
Yeah, I just said for people that are just for like that.
And it would be big. And to me, the big picture is, well, you mentioned the price disparities is horrendous. There was a study by our Department of Health earlier in January, came out, showed that a certain type of simple, not a complicated, but a regular knee replacement. I'm talking about
simple things, not complicated.
A simple knee replacement ranged at Minnesota hospitals between about $4,000 at one. The high range was like 30-some thousand. 8-to-1 price disparity. Nationally, the same numbers for those things range from $3,500 to $56,000.
So why can't the Democrats and Republicans get together and solve that problem?
Because what you need, because this is such a weird market, it's a lot of monopoly providers in many cases, and nobody negotiates prices. It's supposed to be the insurance companies are negotiating the prices.
But why can't consumers negotiate those prices if they know what they're being charged?
If they know what they're being charged. I had neck surgery at Regions a few years ago. First of all, I'm in pain and don't have a lot of ability to do it. I don't know how to shop around, and I don't want cheap quality. I'm not looking for the bargain basement one. But in this case, quality and cost may have no connection, as you know.
There's really not much.
There's not
so
much.
that's what I'm
Right.
getting
How do
at
you-
is that I think that people in the
Right.
business world
They wanna
would-
see
and,
that,
and
yeah.
all, most Minnesotans would think that having consumers having
Right.
a say in making those decisions would be more agreeable than having the state
Right.
government be
Okay.
the final
Right.
arbitrator.
The difficulty is the complexity gets so huge. And the analogy I'll make on how we pay for healthcare versus the way we pay for something else like education. If we funded our schools the way we funded hospitals, every kid at the end of every day, a teacher would have to sit down for half an hour, calculate how much time he or she spent with each student, send it to the school billing office. The school billing office bill their parents. It's so
Okay.
expensive they have to have school insurance
Yeah.
plans. You have a rigmarole, you'd have a huge bureaucracy just for the billing and collection of stuff. And then some schools are out of network and everything else. You could never justify it because it's so
And
convoluted.
again, I was talking about just smaller things, not the big,
But
big
but the
items.
point is, we got to fix the smaller things and the big things if we want to address this, because there's a reason we're spending twice what others spend. And if you go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, and I realize that, but I'm just saying that in this case, they were able to save a lot of money,
Right.
and they weren't dealing with major. Somebody has a heart attack,
Right.
they're not
Oh,
going to
I
have you go
understand.
online. But
And-
if you're going to have to get an MRI on your shoulder,
Right.
you can
And
look
the
and find some
difficulty
things.
is there are lots of good businesses doing little things like that. Each one of them, they don't. If you figure you and I and a group of 100 people, we need so much health care. And some business can say, hey, I can save you money
Okay.
doing this way. And there are Minnesota businesses that do things like that too. But in the end, none of them are delivering
Okay.
a penny worth of health care, and they all need to be paid.
Now, I want to go, okay, that's
Okay.
a good point. I want to go back a little bit here to the Minnesota businesses again. So
Right.
let's say I've got a small company here in Minnesota, and the state is looking to go to some sort of a universal
Right.
health insurance program, and I'm paying commercial property taxes much higher than other parts in the country. I'm paying a significant amount for work comp insurance.
right.
I'm paying a lot of money for my personal taxes,
Right.
and then we have to pay for this new system. And again, you can't reinvent the whole United States healthcare system in the state of Minnesota.
No, we don't want to reinvent the healthcare system. We want to reinvent how we access the system.
Okay. So how are you going to sell that to me so I'm not going to have to increase my taxes
Sure.
significantly more than I already have?
And let me put it this way.
Okay.
That $51 billion I say we're spending on healthcare,
Right.
that amount of money that employers are spending on healthcare, we're already spending that money. We want to spend that money in a more efficient manner. That's the goal. The goal is to spend the money in a way that gets me, the employer, and you, the employee, and all the employees, gets them the care they need when they need it as efficiently as they can with as little cost as possible.
Okay, are you going to be able to do this without increasing the commercial industrial property taxes, do you think, and the
What we would
personal
be
income
proposing, what we would be proposing
Okay.
is for individuals would be paying, instead of me paying premiums to Health Partners or to Blue Cross or
Yeah.
whoever, I'd be paying my premiums to Minnesota Health Plan. Everybody'd be paying them because it's based on ability to pay. So if you're making very little money, you're making minimum wage or something, you're paying very little, but you're paying something, because I think everybody ought to pay into it. And employers, instead of paying the premiums and in paying the things that they have to do under the Affordable Care Act and so on, and shopping around and negotiating all this and so on, they'd be paying some sort, we haven't figured out whether it would be a payroll tax or what, but it would be a tax that should be less than, in other words, if employers are paying on the average about less than a quarter, but close to a quarter of all our healthcare expenses, if you cut it down by 10% or something so they're paying less than it, instead of paying those premiums and so on, they'd be paying that. It wouldn't go to state government. It would go directly to the Minnesota Health Fund and pay just for Minnesota health care.
Okay.
And the point is, those businesses, and their employees are spending that money now. And we're spending, again, as I said, twice what anybody else is. Let's find a cheaper way to do it.
Okay. Now, Senator Marty, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, and talk further about this issue, how can they do that?
Yeah, probably easiest way, we'll call my office or my email, all of it at the Capitol. I'd be happy to talk with people about this.
Okay.
I think this is something that should be hugely helpful to businesses and to families. And again, it's a moral issue. There are people who die from a lack of health care in this state. There are lots of people, and it happens routinely, and it doesn't make headlines. Unfortunately, it just is far too common for that. People can't afford their insulin, people can't afford to get their teeth checked out when they need, and so on. And we have poor health outcomes as a result of that. So we want to make sure they get it. And
so, and your phone number is?
651-296-5645.
And your
email is simple. It's just J Marty, last name, and at senate.mn is in Minnesota. Okay. It's simple to do that. I'm happy to talk people, and they can look more if they want to learn more. mnhealthplan.org. We have a website with a lot more information on how it works and so on.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Marty, for joining me today. This is Tom Snell on Your Business Matters.
You've been watching Your Business Matters. For more information on this program or the White Bear Area Chamber, visit whitebearchamber.com or call 651-429-8593.